Hello, everyone. Um, so to let you know about today, and thank you all for registering for this event. We're really excited. It's the first of its kind from Altia, and it really is an open forum. It's designed to be a place where we can have a discussion, we can sort of share ideas, and today we thought it'd be great to talk about two sort of key areas, and we'll jump onto that in a moment. I think what would be worth doing is just giving you an idea of the agenda. Dave Sampson is joining us. He has an amazing background in policing, over 30 years as a police investigator, and has become, in that time, expert in many areas, including fraud and OSINT. So we thought it would be great to sort of pick his brains and dig into his journey through that and share that with everyone on the call. We wanted to focus this session on a couple of areas when it comes to OSINT, which is the idea of transparency. So actually showing people what you're doing, being able to have that confidence that your journey is being able to be seen by whether it's juries, investigators, lawyers, victims, whoever, but also that can stand up in court and you know that you've got a strong case. So that's kind of going to be the premise for the call. We're going to look at some real world applications as well of this in the fraud world, in criminal investigations, and we'd love to hear from you as well if you start to chime in. There's so many different people on the call today. I know we're coming in from Canada, we're coming in from Texas, we've got people in the UK, but also be good to have a bit of your background as well. Are you an investigator? Are you in law enforcement? Are you a private investigator? Are you at a law firm? If you could start sort of chiming in on the chat as well, we can sort of tailor as well some of the things that we talk about. So do let us know what it is you do. And I'll begin just by introducing myself and Altia, because I'm aware that a lot of you probably haven't encountered Altia before. So you can probably tell from my voice, we are based in the UK. We are a global business delivering investigative software solutions across many different areas, including financial investigations, case management, transcription, OSINT, many others as well. We are actually fortunate enough to be trusted and deployed across all the 45 UK police forces and agencies, also across agencies in Australia, Canada, America, the Royal Virgin Islands, and the rest of the world as well. My role is quite interesting. I deal with a lot of the customers that we have across Canada and America, so I try my best to travel over there as much as possible and meet with customers and also new potential customers, but really just bring together a community of people to share ideas. Already, again, in the chat, you can see we've got law enforcement officers, OSINT analysts, so we will always have a big range of people that we speak with. My background, before I stop talking and hand over, is mainly in software. So I do have a big sort of background in software and helping get customers on board and understand how to get the most out of software solutions, and also have a short period of experience as a Metropolitan Police detective as well. With that, I will hand over to Stan, if you don't mind just sort of introducing yourself and saying hello to everyone.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks, Toby. Hello, everyone. Good to see you all. Thank you for coming. My name is Stan Yakimov. I am a digital strategy manager here at Altia. I work across our investigative solutions to try and make sure that all of our customers are getting the most out of the software. Before joining Altia just over 3 months ago now, I worked for the insolvency service here in the UK as an insolvency financial investigator. I worked on complex asset recovery matters, anything from liquidations and bankruptcies, and making sure that creditors get paid. And just before that, I worked for a local county council as a counter fraud investigator, dealing with any type of fraud that would affect, local authorities. So benefits fraud, direct payments, bribery, and corruption. So that's my short. It was summarized 4 years into a few sentences. So I think with that, I'll pass over back to Toby.
Cheers, Dan. Thank you very much. And yeah, Dave, we'll hand over to you and we'll dig into your background if you want to say hello to everyone and give us maybe a brief intro, and then we can go through that a little bit more detail.
Yeah, I think I'll start with a little health and safety warning. Toby and Stan, they've got lovely English accents. They're beautiful, especially Toby from that West London. It's beautiful. I come from the northeast of London, of England, you may notice I have a slightly different accent. So subtitles may be available if required, but it's just that you may have to have that little pause to understand this. I historically, and I'll give you a quick summary of my little world. I went off, I saw this book about the streets of London being paved with gold. So I went down to London and joined the Metropolitan Police far too long ago. I then spent a great time down in there, and then I moved back, as everybody does, to the area where they're from. And throughout the course of the next 25 and 30 years in total, I was embedded as an investigator detective within the police. During that course of that time, I specialized in a number of things from the world of digital forensics, financial investigation, fraud, and latterly, towards the end of when I left law enforcement, I moved into the world of cyber and open source and started specializing in that area. And then if I just step it back a little bit in that, just before and probably in the last 10 years, I bumped into a company called Altia. I started using their products. I met a lovely woman called Steph Lucen, who is one of the key people within Altia for delivering the products and finding out what clients want and matching their expectations. And I got that understanding of who they are, what they are, as Toby explained about the company. And I didn't think, oh, I'll leave policing, I'll go and work for them. It's a bit of a journey. So I retired from law enforcement. I went on a little journey. I worked for a number of companies. I do a little bit of work with a university from a lecturing point of view. And then I've come to Altia's door when they were looking for an open source investigation solution. And that's ultimately what's brought me here, and then brought me here tonight to have a chat with yourselves.
Thanks, Dave. And yeah, it's a great journey, and we're really proud to have Dave on board. And I think we were mentioning a few things there around coming and helping with the product, but today is really not a session for us at Altia to talk about that product. We do have OSINT products available, but this is actually, we wanted to talk about OSINT as a topic much more broadly. And I think something that I've noticed, especially on LinkedIn, which is where the majority of you have probably heard about this event, is that the OSINT community is really, really strong. It's a really great community out there where we want to share ideas, we want to talk about things, and there's kind of a nice back and forth, I find, where people might disagree with one another or feel like they have a different approach to how they investigate in the world, but actually there's that sharing of ideas, which I think is really nice. So what we're trying to kickstart with these events is, yeah, some of them might be more product focused, some might be more focused on a specific solution, but today is kind of an intro session, I guess, to see whether this is something that others find of value. And I think I kind of want to start, Dave, with a question to you that sounds quite basic, but when I speak to people, no matter how experienced or inexperienced they are in the world of OSINT, is actually around the term itself. We hear it a lot, and I think it can be used a lot, overused, underused. When you hear the term, what do you think of, and how would you sort of clearly define that term from an investigator's point of view?
It's a good point, you see, because people either like it or don't like it. But it's been around a long time, and it's got an establishment. There's other forms of gathering intelligence other than open source. So I think the term open source intelligence works quite nicely. I think it's that fit, but it's about really just being access to data that is freely available. And by free, I don't mean there's no cost. You may have to pay. One of the bits we're going to get onto in a while is a lot of the services are now becoming paid for services. Data is a high profit industry. People have realized that, so they're protecting it, but it's still available. There may be a payment needed, but there's ways to get to that data, and it's about how you get that data. I just want to challenge you on one thing first, Toby. You've chucked it in a couple of times, the word expert, and I keep having a little shiver, and I don't mean that in a bad way, but it's from that world of law enforcement investigation. Expert has a sort of particular meaning. I know what you mean. It's somebody who's specialized in that area. And it's just to clarify that as well. We've got to be careful around that use of the word expert. It means different things to different people. So we've just got to be mindful when we're using it. But no, the open source is that process. And everybody now thinks, I've got a computer, I've got a phone, it's finding data there. But are you taken back to the early 90s when there's no Google? Yeah, Toby, Stan, there was a time before Google. I know you're probably too young, 1999, if I'm right on my dates or thereabouts, was the formation of Google. So there's a time before that. So data was still available, but you were getting it in different sources, freely available, newspapers and things of that nature. And then we've had this massive surge in the internet, and it's just grown and grown. And two, I would say probably until 5 years ago, it was still a bit niche. People still focused on, do we have telecoms data? Do we have CCTV? Do we have forensic evidence in the classic fingerprints, the DNA? And only now is the profile of the open source begin to rise and becoming that more key feature that sort of binds the other elements together.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, and yeah, take the note on board around the term expert. And there's one thing you said there though that I wanted to sort of delve into a bit more, which you say, do I remember the pre-Google? I do actually. I remember dial-up. That was my initial, and then Ask Jeeves, and then kind of Google and all of that. But obviously, I was young. You mentioned around the surge in the internet, and I think obviously we see that all the time. Every 5 years there's a new thing that comes out. At the moment, obviously AI is driving that, and this is not an AI webinar, and I don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but it's around the point of being a surge, and I feel like that's also translates across to investigations. And what I think is interesting is, where does OSINT become OSINT? Is that even a thing? Because in low level investigations, even sort of volume crime, there is so much work that needs to be done. There's so much evidence that can be captured from social media pages, from records, like you say, all this open available information. Do you think there is a line in your mind when you think about OSINT where actually this is now what I'm talking about, or do you think it does start from that lower level, and should it be, how do we sort of instill that in your sort of newer investigators?
It's a really good point. And I think you have to go back to, and again, I'm going back to the old stuff, the low card principles. Every contact leaves a trace. And I would now update that to every crime involves a digital element. I would challenge someone to say, here's a crime where there's no digital element. Well, there may not be in certain situations, but there'll be some CCTV before, there'll be some comments before, there'll be some posts. It's involved in everything now, so it's an element you've got to consider. And the open source is just accelerated. Everybody has a mobile phone. You don't meet many people that don't have a mobile phone anymore, just one. Some have multiple, and everybody has, to a degree, a social media presence. I hide. I live in a world of not me, and appear, even just for doing things that I do, is not me. But yourself, Toby, your social media profile I would put as medium to high, because it fits with the portfolio of your role. And there's that whole world now where everybody is on these platforms, everybody's acting on these platforms, so it's producing the content on the different bits, the different platforms and sources everywhere that we want to gather, because that's where they make their comments, that's where they do their actions, that's where they commit the crime, and it's highly relevant in every type of criminality now.
It's in
Dave, I've got to. You just made a really good point there, and I'm listening to you whilst I'm sat here with my mobile phone in front of me, my work phone next to it, my iPad behind it, and my personal laptop behind it as well. But one thing I wanted to ask you is, what are the dangers of criminals realizing that all of this open source data is available and therefore will disrupt their gangs, and then them going offline and then removing the need for OSINT because they'll be hiding without technology? So what's the danger in that?
There is a danger, and it's already here. That's just common sense. Criminals get caught. They go, why did I get caught? I got caught because I had a mobile phone. So the next time they're doing their drugs, they do a burner phone, a phone that they can dispose. So the same happens here. They think, hold on, I got caught because of my social media. So they stop. But sometimes when they're not doing activity is as important as when they're doing activity. It's a clue, because you can't help it. It has become a second nature. You can see children on the way to school. One of my little bugbears is sporting events where everybody's videoing this, say, the World Championship, instead of just putting their phone down and watching and capturing it with their own eyes. So it's an interesting thing. I think there's that balance between it, but it's that overwhelming need. And don't forget, just because Stan the criminal, I'm just using your name as an example, Stan, Everybody around you in your social group won't stop using their social media. So they will talk about things and you will get included in theirs by proxy. So you will not disappear. You cannot hide.
Point. Thank you, Dave.
Yeah, it's a good point, and I think just to sort of flip that as well, from Stan's question, from an investigator's perspective, is around it is that how does with OSINT on that smaller scale, and what I call sort of, for want of a better term, OSINT hygiene, because I always bring this example up, Dave, and you always mock me and tell me that I was probably a bad investigator, which is probably the truth. But I remember when I was dealing with some sort of, like I say, mid to level sort of crimes and having to do OSINT work, and it's kind of you go down this rabbit hole, and you go down the rabbit hole very quickly. You find profiles, you find bits of information, you find a stream on a blog, it might be a Reddit thing, you've got someone's profile who's linked to a profile who's linked to a profile, and you're getting that excitement and that buzz you do get as an investigator, and then the penny drops when you've been doing it for about 35 minutes of, oh, how did I get there? Now I've got the actual bit of evidence, great, but how can I show that? And then you end up actually just with a really great intelligence briefing because you haven't followed steps. So I wanted to dig into that because I know that this is going to unwrap probably a few questions, but also the core of what you believe in that world. So yeah, it'd be good to hear your initial thoughts on that. We can dig into that a bit more.
It's really interesting because everybody does that. You can't help do that. It's called human nature. And you follow that little trail to get there. So what you want is if something behind that, Altia do it, but there's lots of other places that do it, that creates that trail. So it's sort of leaving that little trail of breadcrumbs. This is where I started, and you want it so the system enables you, nice, simple, user-friendly. My little pet hate is more than 3 clicks to do anything. So you want to be into that system and you want to be on the internet looking for the content you want. There's a world of tools out there that you can use to assist you. There's articles now and tools and applications that will go and gather all that data for you. But you're going to get a lot of data. So you've got to be mindful of what you're going to do with that, how you're going to look at that, what is the outcome with that, and how you're going to use that. But I think you've got to have that structured process. I would step it back before you even touch any device. What's your plan? What do you want to achieve? Because you start off and you go off on this little journey, and all of a sudden you've uncovered what you see as this biggest conspiracy plan ever. But you just needed to find this little nugget that is in there, but now you've lost it because you've captured so much. So it's been able to have an auditable trail. This is very much the title that you added to this webinar. How can you defend the position? Let's have an auditable trail. Let's make sure everything we do, somebody, a third person, could come along and repeat those steps, follow where you've got. The internet changes. People delete posts, content changes all the time. But by having that journey, you can see, yes, this is where you went. That content might have gone now, but you can see that, and then having a robust process to capture that content, making sure it's stored, make sure you've got it stored in such a secure way, in an infrastructure, in an environment, in a geolocation that sits with your requirements, needs, security, and then that you can go back to and manipulate it. So find the data, store that data properly, and then apply that manipulation onto it from then.
We've actually, Dave, as you've been speaking, like a really great point has come in on the chat from Louis talking about telecom data and saying, we always need to be cognizant or aware of collateral intrusion. They've got lots of data requests coming in. Is there any pushback is the question for using OSINT, which sometimes might look more intrusive. What's your thoughts on that, and how would you position and answer that?
It's important because I think sometimes people brush it aside as, oh, it's a grey area. And I'm talking now about leaked data. Leaked data is really powerful, it's really strong, it really adds to it, but you have to almost have a little step back and think about the ethics of it. What is that leaked data? How have you got that leaked data? And even if you get leaked data, and it may be a password, a username that really links a person to something you're trying to link them to, but should you have it? Can you use it? What is the position? What is the source of that? And then I'm sure it's something we're going to come and talk about. How do you verify that is true? How can you trust that content? The world we live in now, and this is probably in the last 2 years, people are quite comfortable putting content out there that is really not true, but being adamant that it is true. And we can all think of great examples, but I think sometimes if you say it 10 times, people think, is that true? Or people just say it out of context. If I put a post out, I have a following of about 21 on some social medias. I know it's quite impressive. But if certain people, say the presidents or the people in high social influence as well, put something out, it's seen by millions. And in that instant, it's accepted. And that's the difference. It's how do you validate that? How do you have that confidence? And how do you ultimately, when I'm going back to the grey material, how do you know the source? How can you be happy with that content? And that is an ongoing challenge. It's a big challenge at the minute. One of the biggest challenges.
But then, Dave, I'm just curious here because we talk about you talk about audit trails and everything, but I'm curious what's the difference between performing an OSINT investigation as opposed to just searching stuff online? When does me searching things online, just doing some research and doing some just some searching, when does it then become OSINT work that has to be auditable?
And I would say it's probably for the reason why you're doing it. Why are you doing it? Do you have an investigation? Do you have a subject you're looking at? That is your purpose. So if that's your purpose and you're in a position or a role, or you're a public body, or you're doing this where you need that data reliably later, and it doesn't have to be criminal, it could be civil, it could be anything, but you need the robustness of process, because people will say, that's not true, that didn't happen, and deny it. So that process is needed. So whenever there's a purpose to what you're doing, and you've said, I might need this later from an evidential point of view, in whatever form, you should really have a robust process in place. Sitting there on a night time, sitting on your phone, Googling, I think you're fine not to have an audit trail. There will be an audit trail. I mean, that's up to you, whether you keep that history, but that's your business, Stan.
I think it's a good point that Stan brings in, and it does tie into that transparency, or that's how we refer to it here, right? Is that transparency? And Louis' point, I think, is really good. And I was just checking my notes because I wrote something that kind of ties into it, which is around the biggest challenges in OSINT. I think Stan, you were touching on some there, but it's kind of its own like worst enemy, isn't it? In some ways, because what it allows you to do, Dave, and you've touched on this a few times already, is collate a huge amount of data. Some of that data is exactly what you're looking for, and then, like Louis' point, there's some of that data that isn't what you're looking for. It's not even relevant. But then there might be pools of that data actually where you've crossed over a line inadvertently, and you've got information now that's very sensitive. You've taken that and now you've got it. So I think from my question, Dave, and it might be slightly unfair, but is being transparent and showing your journey and having that transparent audit trail, etc., enough? Especially when it comes to you're in the box, you're being grilled by a defense barrister who's saying, you've now found all of this stuff because you got these amazing tools. Is that enough to show that journey, or what would you like to see if it's not?
But I think when you're doing this journey, as much as yes, go and find the data, you've got to have a robust handling process. What do you do with that data? How do you handle that data? How do you store that data? How long do you retain that data? How long should you retain that data? It should be retained at the same rules that you should retain all of the data. It's open source. It was freely available. I should keep that forever. I start doing an open source investigation on you, Toby, and over the next 20 years, I capture everything that I can find about you. That just becomes a significant life picture of you. And I don't think that's fair to you unless you're up to no good throughout that whole 20 years. So there's got to be the balance of how long do you retain the data, and should you dispose of the data, and how you dispose of the data. And it's right. It's a very good point by Louis. We've applied these standards to other data sets. So where's the open source requirements of how long you keep it? Yes, you've got the data collection rules about how long you keep that data, but in that, when you're capturing it, what is the understanding of how long you capture it and what sources should you have? And it's about being open with your own investigation, looking at it, reviewing it, and thinking, do I need that? Is it relevant? And if something's not relevant, you should get rid of it. You can keep it for a time, but it's not relevant, and you might need to disclose that something's not relevant. But if it's not relevant to your investigation, you don't need it. You're just creating. I don't want to mention the disclosure world. We could do a whole session on disclosure, so I'm not even going to go there.
I was going to sort of follow up with a quick tail ender to that as well, which wasn't the disclosure, but was around, going back to the beginning of the webinar. We've got people from Canada, people from the US, we've got people from the UK. Obviously, the jurisdictions are very different, and there are some freedoms in some countries where you can go into a lot more intrusive, as we might refer to it here, sort of investigative practices. And from your, I guess, understanding, Dave, do you have much of a view on that? Do you, not as an opinion necessarily, but like, do you feel like there are core differences between being an OSINT investigator in the UK compared to being an OSINT investigator in North America, for example?
No, and that's why I really like it. Yes, the data sets are different. What you can find is different. But from the UK, I can do an investigation anywhere in the world. Sadly, I don't get to travel anywhere in the world, but I can go and look, and I've done them in the Dominican Republic. I've done things of that nature and gone and sorted out that, found that data. And you're looking for, how do you know how a company's registered in the Dominican Republic? How can you find who's in an address in the United States? It's ridiculously easy, and it's something that we added into our product. But you can't do that in the United Kingdom. You can do it, but you can't do it as readily without having the access. But in America, it's very different. So you have to learn different ways. One of the links I've shared with Stan to share with the group is a whole set of data sets around doing investigations in Canada. So different areas have different needs and different requirements. So it's great. It's a global functionality. That's why I love the open source, because it's globally available and you can do it from anywhere.
Absolutely, and you mentioned the links there. I can see Stan in the document trying to find some of those, and we're going to start sharing some links in the chat. There are too many to share in one session, but we'll share some that we've mentioned that might be relevant and useful for people to take a look at, and the rest we'll share as a sort of follow-up to the session today. But yeah, I think just wanted to just prompt users in the chat as well to feel free to add any comments in. We can talk about a few other things as a sort of come towards the tail end of the webinar. But if you do have any sort of burning questions, we'll do our best to answer them, or at least provide some of our thoughts on Dave's thoughts specifically on how they work. But I wanted to move the conversation on slightly, and again, this is more towards the tool, Dave, that you've been building with us here at Altia. And I don't mean this from a perspective of let's push it, right, and let's tell people about it. But I think it's what's really interesting is that you have taken the core principles of your experience in the OSINT world, and we've touched on a number of those at the moment. We've touched upon that transparency, building these defensible investigations, and how important that is. I think we've also had questions in the chat that have advocated that this is really important area. But there's the other side to the system. And there's the other side to the OSINT world, what I wanted to dig into, which is the fun side. And that's how, we can build up a massive evidential picture, not just on an individual, but actually build an entire case and start getting a massive area of information. And I wanted to talk to you a little bit about that and hear from you on some of the things that are out there at the moment, tools that you've used, whether they're Altia based or otherwise, and features. You don't have to name drop or anything like that, but if there are just things that you've seen that you think these are amazing and I wish I'd had access to them back when I was doing more of this, like that's kind of what I wanted to hear.
Yeah, and I think it's a good point. And it really is an interesting bit in that is the world of Bellingcat. Bellingcat really brought the use of open source and open source tools to the sort of public knowledge. They publicized what they did. There's some great examples of what they've done going back, and that's sort of made people become armchair investigators, which is great because it's about building that curiosity about it, and then it leads to people, that's what I want to do. You find the way into it. How do I become involved in it, which is a challenge. And then it's interesting then what and how, and there's a tool for everything. I don't like people to get too wrapped up in tools because there is tons of tools. I mean, we're sharing them to say, here's some great tools, but the tools need to come with that level of maturity that investigative responsibility. You wouldn't go into a house and say, oh, look, there's 3 phones as evidence and start picking them all up and having a look. You still apply the principles. Let's make sure it's secure. Let's make sure I'm anonymous. Let's go and find the data. Let's make sure we capture it in that safe, secure way. I don't mean to be boring here, but it's important. And then when we've got that data into our data set, how can we manipulate it? And I've found some things, but I want to find more things. What's there to available? And the magical thing, going back to what you mentioned about the open source community, you can ask, is like, does anybody know how to do this? I saw a great example. It was a BBC documentary, and they were using the angle of the sun to calculate when an incident happened. I mean, I've not needed that, funny enough, in anything I've done, but it's great to know that that functionality is there. And little things. I was doing an inquiry once, and it wasn't a big incident or a big offence, but somebody was stealing in bulk ladies' makeup products, and then they were passing them on to their daughter, and their daughter was selling them on eBay. I was trawling through, and I found the reflection of the suspect in the lids of one of the bottles, and it's those tiny little things that gives you the great satisfaction. Yes, I found things that connected organized crime groups together, which is great, but finding that little bit of someone's little face reflected in a makeup bottle, that makes the case. That's the little things. That's what needs to be a good investigator. It's great, you can go and look and you can have a checklist, do this, do that, do this, do this, and work to that. Or it's being that curious person. Where do I go next? Where's my pivot point? I've got an email address. What can I do with that email address? OSINT Industries, Epios, that sort of way. How can I get another pivot point? What happens when I get that pivot point? Where do I now go? Where can I get more information? And that's why it's a great world to work in.
Dave, I'm just curious here. What would you say from your experience and in your opinion are the key, I want to say, legal and ethical considerations to keep in mind when conducting an OSINT investigation?
The usual, as you would do when you consider, is my activity legal? Really, really important. I think if you establish that from the starting point, is it doing it? Is what I'm doing proportionate? Am I collecting what I should be collecting? There's a lot to be said, and there's applications now where you can go and get everything, bring it all in, and then do some analytics. Should you be doing that? I'm not saying you shouldn't, but should you be doing it? Can you justify it? And it's that making sure you go through those steps. Am I mindful of surveillance? Good example is I look at somebody, and we'll pick somebody there. We'll look at Bernadette. Toby, you look at Bernadette. Stan, you look at Bernadette. We're from one investigative organisation. As an organisation, Kingdom-wise, we should have a surveillance authority probably for that activity. So that again brings you back to make sure your activity is legal. Make sure it's legal. Make sure you retain the data properly. Make sure you protect yourself for some operational security. Make sure you're anonymous to you and your organisation. And then you're in that lovely starting point to go and capture it. Ideally, and I will say this, use our Altia investigator application, but there is other products out there for different environments, different places, individuals that can do that investigation for you.
That's amazing. Thank you. That kind of brings me back to when I used to do investigations for the council, where we would be doing things like blue badge fraud or benefits fraud, and there was always the question, which was, at what point does repeated online searching or monitoring of someone in the UK becomes unauthorized surveillance requiring the use of RIPA powers or IPA powers? It's kind of that. I mean, in your opinion, at what point would you say that if you continually search someone online, you'd have to, you go away from being an OSINT investigator to having to, perform RIPA investigations?
Yeah, it always comes up, this question, and you get varying answers. I would say if I spend all day looking at an individual, capturing that information, to me that's one visit, because I'm building that initial collection plan. But the next day, I want to go back to see if they've put anything new on. I should be considering a surveillance authority. And then I go back the next day, the next day, the next day. There's a point where I'm doing surveillance on that person, and I'm literally going, well, I'm only looking at his Facebook to see if he's put a new post on. But there is a point. I think probably once you hit that second occasion and you're considering the third, and because you're considering the third, you should be considering the surveillance authority. It doesn't hurt to ask, and if someone tells you no, you're all right at this time, continue. But you've asked the question, and if as long as you document it, justify it, it keeps everything legal and proportionate.
Thank you. That was always, I think, as a junior investigator, that was my point where I would always think like, okay, so if I'm searching it again and again and again, I don't think I need a surveillance authority because it's open source, right? So I could do it if I wasn't employed as an investigator. So why would I need it? But you make a good point here that, if you keep going back in again and again, that's when you'd have to, look again.
I think it comes back to the classic term of great power comes greater responsibility.
Yeah, of course.
Later get a quote in at some point.
That's it.
Yeah.
We'll have to put your name behind it, but we might get in trouble if we do that.
I don't think it's mine.
It's not. I think it's Spider-Man, if I'm not mistaken. But look, we're coming almost to the end. I know everyone's very busy who's on this call, and we appreciate you all sticking with us and engaging with us. And funnily enough, the last point we were just talking about there, the surveillance authority, was the second question kind of that Lou was asking that's now been answered nicely. I don't know, Stan, have you planned that or whether that just came up naturally? So well done for that. But Dave, I think it'd be nice to sort of look at some closing thoughts from you. And obviously we're going to do a lot more webinars. They might all be OSINT specific focused. They might have an angle of fraud, or they might have an angle of digging into financials and all of that. But you mentioned something, and I thought it could be a nice sort of ending conclusion kind of point anyway, which is around pivot points and pivot points within OSINT, and just maybe expanding on that a little bit more, because I think that's a really core part of OSINT investigation. And it'd be good to hear about, I think, how to stay on track, when to pivot, when not to pivot, how to pivot, and all of that. Be good to hear from you, your thoughts.
No, it's great. We want content. Content is what gives you the evidence. But to find the evidence, you need to get to where that content is. So you pivot on the things that will lead you to it. If you find an email address, find something that will search and identify content connected to that email address. If that brings you to a telephone number, pivot again on that phone number, find something from that phone number that will bring you to something for finding you the content, and then look upon those identifiers and pivot through. It's just good practice. Don't just think, I've had a quick look, there's nothing there. You've got to be persistent. You've got to know when to follow. And it's interesting that there's some really good products out there that will take data and present back to you findings. But what else could be there? Pivot again, take that and pivot and look for the more information. And remember, just because you've found the content that day, they might post something the next day and the next day. And I could talk for a while about our perpetual search capability,
Yeah.
but we're out of time.
Well, I was going to say the final thing, and there's a question that's coming from James around OSINT Industries and it being linked to Altia. What I might do, Dave, if it's all right with you, is I was just going to share our screen real quick on the link I've just shared with everyone to OSINT, and you just maybe give us a 2-minute rundown as I scroll down the page, and also with an answering of that question of, are we affiliated, are we partnered with OSINT Industries, and I think that would be a nice way to end.
Yeah, very much. We will happily partner with anybody if it brings us more information to supply for our users. And that's the secret. We cannot produce the answers to everything. It is about being the best of breed, and the best of breed will come from being those connections. And we have a partnership with OSINT Industries. I don't think it mentions on our website that as such, unless I'm mistaken. I should know our own website.
It's recently updated, I think, as well. So, but yeah, it might be on there somewhere. But we are partnered. Yeah, we are partnered with them as well. So, for anyone who doesn't know, I'm sure you do. But Dave, maybe give us a brief rundown of what that partnership actually allows within the capturing element of what we do as well.
It's great. OSINT Industries, if you don't know it, you really got to get to know it. It's a real powerful beast. It allows you to find pivot points and pivot, and it brings content to it. We are going to connect via an API, so when we have content in our system, it will automatically be run through their process. But it's not just them. We will connect with any data set. We want to connect with a load of data sets to enhance our product as well.
Yeah, I think what we will do, because it might be a side webinar, is do a live demonstration of what we have at Altia. It is linked with great uses like OSINT Industries, but there are a lot of other similar sort of data points and areas where we can create visual maps and have data fields and put sort of searches in place and perpetual searches. And as an OSINT investigator, it is an incredible and powerful tool. We will give you the opportunity, if you want to see that, to come along. And what I've also done is just put in a form. It will literally take you 15 to 20 seconds, maybe slightly longer if you want to leave us lovely feedback, but it's not really about saying if we were good or not. It's more to say what value you would see in the future, because I think we've got an amazing group of people on here. Obviously the chat it comes with time, but I think sharing ideas, it doesn't need to just be focused on what we want to talk about. We want to hear what you want to talk about as well. So if you click on that form, we're going to end the webinar in about 60 seconds, so click on it now to open up the tab. If there are any final comments or questions in the chat, then please drop them in now. We'll do our best to either quick fire answer them, or we can send them back to you. But this will be a series that we're going to continue into the future, so we're going to do new webinars. We'd love to hear what you'd want us to cover on those, and we will do our best to incorporate those ideas. We'll probably have those again on LinkedIn, so I will just put a quick link as well into the Altia page on LinkedIn. If you're not following us as a company, then make sure you are, because then that will just make your life easier to see them as they come through. I'll just drop that in now. Would searches be capped by user? No, is the short answer to that, Louis. So we can send some more information on that. It's quite a free and open product to use, and quite straightforward in terms of how it's sort of licensed out. But yeah, we don't want to restrict anything in that sense. It's quite open, so we'll give you an idea of how that works as well if you want some more info. Maybe the final link as well, as we're finishing off, will just be a quick link here. Appreciate them. So these are all safe links, as you obviously know, for the webinar, but the final link is my meeting diary. So if you want, just book time in. Even if you can't make that time, it doesn't matter, just so I know that you want to have a chat, and I'll send you an email. So click on that link as well, get it opened up. What I can do is set up a call where I and Dave and Stan, or whoever is most appropriate to deal with questions, can answer those. So if you are interested in seeing products, if you want a demo one-to-one, if you want to share feedback or be involved even as a speaker in next kind of talks, then please let us know. On that, I think we're going to end. Any final words, Stan or Dave, or just like to say goodbye to everyone? Oh, the booking link doesn't work. Brilliant. I'll tell you what, I appreciate that. I'll just send you my LinkedIn, because you can click on it on there. It might be because I updated one earlier, but if you go on there, there's a book an appointment link, which I'm just testing. That will work, so that should work for you. It's on my LinkedIn. It's one of the top buttons where it says profile and book an appointment. You can book an appointment there. So yeah, open that up. Dave, Stan, any final words before I let people jump off?
No, it's great.
No,
Go and search.
Yeah, it's been a great one.
Amazing. Well, look, thank you everyone so much for joining. The chat might be active after. I'm not sure if it will, but yeah, thank you everyone. Appreciate your time, and we'll see you at the next one.